I often get these questions. I have tried going gluten free, I've tried going dairy free, I have eliminated certain other foods, but I haven't seen much of a difference, and I really struggle to sustain these dietary changes, right? It's too hard. Or I have already been many of these foods for a while, and now I'm hardly eating anything. So it's kind of like a food fatigue. Or, so these kind of things are extremely common. And focusing on foods that help our body to heal is hard, right? I get that. And over the years of coaching my clients with chronic illnesses like autoimmune conditions, I found that often when it comes to changing their diet, there is a feeling that everything needs to be done at the same time, right? We have come to a point where most of us realize that food plays an important role in our healing process, and we need to focus on certain foods, and we need to probably remove certain foods from our diet. But what we may struggle with is that we do not take the time to mentally prepare ourselves before we make those dietary changes, right? So before even we get started with some of these making these personal dietary changes, we need to be in the right place. We need to basically be in the right place in our minds and in our houses and our kitchens, right? So we need to be clear on why we are making these changes, right? So it's important to get that understanding. It's important to be very clear. And also what often happens is that there is no real preparation in their house, in their kitchen. So there is not really much of a focus in terms of which foods I should be stocking up on, which foods I should be removing from my from my pantry, from my cupboards, kitchen cupboards if necessary. Often it may not be possible to completely eliminate gluten or dairy. That's fine, but at least having alternatives is really important even before you make the dietary changes, right? So it's about taking a step-by-step approach. That's something that I find is often missing. So people just sort of dive deep into it all at the same time, and not everyone is ready to take these steps at the same time and sort of then remain on that path for long. So what happens is that they are gluten free, dairy free, they may or may not see some improvements because only removing gluten and dairy may not be enough, and is usually not enough for most people with severe conditions like autoimmune conditions, but it is a necessary first step. However, having said that, just removing it for a while is not is not how it will work. And so when you are dealing with any kind of chronic illness, of course food will play a significant role. As Dr. Mark Hyman says, food is the most powerful drug on the planet. So no matter what medications you're on, no matter what your diagnosis is, the foods that you're consuming on a daily basis is going to play an important role in your body's healing process, right? Yet this is not what we are told by the conventional medicine practitioners, and this is not what is followed as per conventional medicine protocol. The foods that we eat and their impact on our health is routinely ignored in the conventional medicine arena. There is a lack of education, knowledge and awareness there. As far as modern medicine is concerned, Western medicine is concerned. However, the good news is there is a lot of awareness that is actually coming in, the kind of information that is available at our fingertips. So the kind of research that is available, this is all based on research. The kind of role that food plays in our health, because we understand that certain foods make us sick, right? It's not good for us. So junk foods, highly processed foods, sugar laden beverages, so we know and understand that that's not good for us. But how often do we realize that there are certain foods which can help heal us, right? So that's often the missing piece. So, and it doesn't make it easier for us to stick to certain foods which we know are good for us, and it's certainly not enough for us to feel good about going off foods that we once loved, right? So we don't get enough support in these kind of situations, which is why it's, we just don't do it, right? And I'm going to talk about this a bit, and I'm going to talk about some of the areas that I focus on in my client program, in my coaching program, which helps my clients to sustain these dietary changes. So one of the biggest challenges that many people face when making all these when changing their diet is a lack of motivation. So we put off till we can, even though we know it's beneficial for us. We put off these changes, even though we know that we would heal much faster, we would feel much better, we will probably see reversal of symptoms, so we put it off. But apart from the lack of motivation, apart from not feeling motivated enough, there can be other reasons, and I'm going to just take you through that, because these are very, very common reasons I find. One is that there can be overwhelm, right? If it's too hard, or if there is too much to do all at once. So if I give my clients like 20 handouts on the very first session or the second session, and tell them to start implementing all of this together, it leads to overwhelm, and overwhelm is a toxin, right? It's a kind of a toxin. So rather than doing that, we take a step-by-step approach, and that's what you need to do as well. So rather than trying to do all of it at once, you need to understand what needs to be done in step 1, then step 2, and then each step builds on the other. The other thing is that convenience, right? We are used to doing things in a certain way. We are used to buying certain groceries from a certain store, maybe ordering, foods from a certain place. So there are so many things, planning our meals in a certain way, or maybe not planning them at all beforehand. So we are used to doing all of this, and it's convenient for us, and we are used to it. Changing it is not easy, right? So we need to work on this aspect as well. Taste, because it takes, taste is a big one, right? Many times when we go off certain foods because we are not told the right way to do it, for example, going off fat completely makes, everything taste like cardboard. It's true. I mean, if you've tried, having many low-fat options which actually are laden with sugar to bring some taste back into it, right? And that's what was told to be healthy for us. Unfortunately, that's not true. But anyway, so taste is a big one, but we need 12 to 15 exposures to certain foods to even start liking them, right? After all, food needs to be pleasurable and interesting, and there are ways to do that. Again, the way that my clients do it is by spicing up certain foods, adding maybe different flavors, experimenting with different flavors, right? So all of that, adding certain amount of fats to their diet, like healthy fats. So all of it sort of makes it more interesting and enjoyable, right? It has to be an enjoyable experience. Hunger, often hunger is something that sort of crops up, because when you remove certain foods from your diet, if you're not having adequate healthy proteins and fats, you might actually start feeling more hungry more often, and that becomes a problem, right? That will prevent you from continuing with this kind of a diet, right? Which is actually beneficial for you in the long run. So knowing how to and when to add healthy proteins and fats, which is typically every meal starting from breakfast, is extremely important. And of course community, because in community is where it is hard to be a deviant when you are making dietary changes, right? Because you might be the only one who's not having gluten, or you might be the only one who's vegan, or not having dairy, maybe not having certain other foods. So it's hard to again continue that in a social setting. So it's, it takes courage, and it takes a very different mindset when you are trying to make these changes, especially in a community, especially in a social setting. So again, planning for this, preparing mentally for this is really helpful. Going through the menu even before you go to a particular restaurant, and knowing what you're going to order. These are just some of the practical steps that you can take, and maybe even customizing a couple of options that they have in the restaurant, speaking to them in advance, right? These are very, very practical steps that I teach my clients to take, so that in a social setting, so that when they go out for meals with their friends, it becomes easier to continue with the diet that they have chosen to embark on, because they know it's going to help them, right? We cannot stop living just because we are trying to heal from a certain particular kind of illness, right? So these are very, very common challenges, but The good thing is that there are ways to overcome these challenges. There are ways to anticipate and prepare for many of them and plan ahead, right? So that's what I was sharing with you. If you have any questions, Kavita, thank you for joining. Make sure to drop in the comments below. And the other very, very important point, which is the whole reason I'm doing this session today, is I find that there is a need to let go of perfection. Right? When it comes to making any kind of changes, and especially when it's diet, when it's something that involves such a big part of our lives, it is really important to let go of certain expectations and about how it should go and the way it should exactly proceed. And this is one of the most effective ways of actually making sure that you can continue on this path, right? So once again, if you have any questions, put it down below. And so I give my clients permission to be messy. I give them permission to experiment with the foods in the diet plan. So of course I provide guidance, I provide a template in which they can play around. But that's the whole point, right? Rather than aiming for perfection, like aiming for that perfect diet and being right all the time, we lay down certain ground rules, right? So there are certain things that we have to get it right. For example, in chronic illnesses like autoimmune conditions, where gluten is one of the primary drivers and factors in enhanced intestinal permeability leading to autoimmune disease progression, gluten is one of the foods that has to go 100%. So that's sacrosanct. That is something that we cannot play around with. So that's gone. Then of course junk foods and sugar laden beverages, that's another one. Then focusing on more plant foods, so vegetables for example. So we lay certain ground rules, and of course if as the client gets more and more motivated and sort of excited about this, then we add in other things like maybe no dairy, and in some cases when we don't see much improvements, maybe we even need to move to no grains. But it's like a step-by-step process so that there is no overwhelm, right? And there is a way to make it enjoyable and even pleasurable in many ways, right? So once we start we have put down some of these ground rules, we take baby steps, right? And it depends on, of course, the person. So I teach them, as I mentioned, letting go of any expectations, and also knowing how to use the dietary guidance that has been provided to experiment with new and different foods, right? So allowing yourself to enjoy creating new recipes, and if you're not into that, just googling recipes. I provide a sample meal plan, but I strongly believe that giving the leeway to my clients, to people, to come up with their own meal plans is really important for it to be sustainable, right? Because somebody living in the south of India will have a very different taste from somebody living in the north of India vis-a-vis somebody living in the east of India. So even in India, and it's true for other parts of the world, but even within our own country, the taste preferences vary a lot, right? So it's very hard to have one set of meals. So I strongly believe that providing this leeway, this flexibility, allows my clients to continue with many of these changes, many of these diets that are beneficial for them in the long run, like long after they stop working with me, right? And it's really empowering to realize that how you can focus on food as medicine and take charge of your own healing process. That's the beauty of doing it in this kind of a step-by-step manner. And as far as motivation is concerned, when it's driven by intrinsic motivation, that means it comes from within you, when it comes because of the reasons that you have come up with, rather than what others think, rather than what I think, right? So there is the coaching works beautifully in this respect, to draw out those reasons from you. So for example, if you have decided to make certain changes in your diet, you've decided to go vegan, or I don't really believe in labels, honestly, when it comes to diet. I believe that there is no one right diet, so it has to be right for you as a person. However, so once you have decided what foods that you want to remove from your diet for a while, what foods you want to focus on. Both are equally important. It is really important for you to understand your reason for doing this, right? What is your why do you want to do this? What are your reasons? What is your intention? So for example, even before my clients start removing the foods from their diet, I make them fill out a form which basically is about mentally preparing themselves, right? Setting an intention for making these changes. So setting an intention becomes really important, right? And then the last bit is, how do you stick to an optimal diet, right? You've figured out all this, you've got some of the, you've understood why you are doing this, you know what to do, but how do you stick to an optimal diet, right? An optimal diet is the one that is right for you. That's what an optimal diet is. It's not right for everyone else. Even with the same diagnosis, it's right for you, with or without a diagnosis for that matter. And the way I would define an optimal diet is one that you can find, you can afford, you can prepare and enjoy in a sustainable manner, right? That's what an optimal diet would look like for you. So that's what, because otherwise there is no point making just short-term changes and cosmetic changes and not probably, seeing much of results. So an optimal diet has to work for you. It has to be something, as I mentioned, like this is a very important piece that I often find that people don't really understand about why they are not able to, support their bodies with the foods that they know are good for them, right? So an optimal diet is one which has to work for you, right? And it is something, as I mentioned, it is something that you can find, afford, prepare and enjoy, right? So there is no point making changes which are short-term, right? And changing a diet at the end of the day is a step-by-step process, right? So that's also the other thing. It's a step-by-step process that requires patience. Because making these changes are not easy. You will have to actually maybe stock up your pantry. You will have to replace some of the foods that are in your kitchen cupboards, right? So there is a way you have to maybe prepare yourself mentally. You have to prepare your family members that you're making these changes. In the Indian context, many of us stay with our in-laws, our extended family. So making sure that they may be on board, even if we don't make changes for everyone. At the same, it's important that at least the family is on board as much as possible, because it supports our change. It makes it just much easier to sustain these changes. So all of these are very important aspects. So it requires patience, right? It requires creativity, because while, for example, I provide a sample meal plan just to give my clients ideas as to what they could possibly eat, because the minute that we say that you can't have this, this and this, and so the feeling is that I have nothing left, right? Because we've not really explored, we don't really know till then that there's so many different options out there. So I do give a sample meal plan. I give many resources and tools to help my clients overcome all these kind of challenges. But still creativity plays an important role to make this whole process pleasurable and enjoyable and sustainable. It requires creativity, right? So finding out new recipes, or maybe a take on a meal in a different way. So for example, I'll give you an example from our life. When my daughter was not well, that's how I got into coaching in the first place. There was a time, for a long period of time, maybe 1 or 2 years, we were not having tomatoes because I was not giving her certain vegetables as well, right? Nightshades. And tomatoes happened to be one of them. So till then, I had this feeling that tomatoes had to be part of many of the Indian curries, many of the, the lentils and the chickpeas and the rajmas, that we make as curries. And when I started experimenting, and when I started, when I stopped using tomatoes, I actually, and I found ways to flavor it with dry mango powder, etc. I actually, that was creativity, right? So that's when I realized that there's so many different ways of sort of making the same kind of foods, making it interesting and making it tasty, right? It's not that it's not tasty. It's so when we need to let go of these fixed notions often, and we need to expand our minds to understand that there's so many options and so many different ways. So that's where our creativity comes in, and of course the commitment, right? This is something that you're in for the long run. If you're already dealing with any kind of chronic illness, if you're very clear that you want to get better, you want to reverse your symptoms, you understand that food is medicine for you. Every bite that you are taking is either moving you towards health or disease. And by the way, this is true even if you're not having any chronic illness. So it is important to monitor the progress and celebrate each win along the way, right? Kalpana, if you are here, say hi. If you have any questions, do drop in the comment below. I can't see if anybody else is here. Just make sure that if you have any questions, to drop in below. Happy to answer any questions, right? And the last point that I want to make here is that having tools and resources to help with all of this is extremely useful, right? So I understand that. So like a sample meal plan that I talked about, a list of foods to eat and not to eat, learning how to read the labels, the ingredients, having a grocery list, and I'm going to share what I have for you today. They are all part of my coaching program to help my clients with all of this, right? So letting go of perfection, letting go of the notion of things have to go a certain way, understanding what an optimal diet, all of these play an important role in supporting your body's healing process. And to help you with all of this, I have put together a list of grocery and snack items that will make it super simple and easy for you to implement what I just talked about. I have this is a free guide, and it contains a list of grocery and snack items along with the links to make purchasing these super easy in India. This is a list of items available in India, and this will save you hours, if not years, because I have actually collated this over the years that I have made these changes for my family, and it will save you a lot of time. To find alternatives and substitute for certain foods. It includes some of the local and upcoming brands in India, and and this free guide is available for you. I'll be sharing the link in the bio. You can go right ahead there, and I'll be sharing the link below here. If you're watching this on replay, drop in your questions and let me know if this was useful for you.